The biggest problem with Abwehr spies watching the Red Ball Express feed Patton and starving their supply maps in 48 hours, it's not what you think. You know that feeling when you're driving on the highway, stuck in endless traffic, but you glance over and see a single delivery truck cruising smoothly in the HOV lane. It's moving at a different speed with a different purpose. That's a tiny hint of what happened. They feared what they couldn't see. They hunted for hidden bases, secret codes, clandestine movements. But the real terror for the German High Command? It was right in front of them. It was a logistical marvel so vast, so relentless, they simply couldn't comprehend it. And it's the same trap you fall into every day. You focus on the obvious, the loud, the dramatic. You miss the quiet, mundane mechanism that actually changes everything. I'm Dr. Atlas Moreau. I'm going to show you exactly how this played out, moment by brutal moment, and why it matters to you now. You can almost smell it, can't you? The acrid tang of diesel fumes hanging heavy in the cool, damp air of a French autumn. An Abwehr spy, perhaps a farmer or a local agent, hunched in a hedgerow. He's looking for patterns, for weakness, for anything that can slow the American advance. But what if the greatest threat wasn't what he couldn't see, but what he did see and totally misunderstood? Here's the point. German intelligence had the data. They recorded the trucks. They saw the convoys. But they lacked the framework, the mental model, to understand what it meant. They saw individual trucks. They didn't see the Red Ball Express as a single, unstoppable force. Imagine this. It's late August 1944. A German intelligence officer sits in a dim room. The air smells of stale tobacco and desperation. He's poring over crude maps. Reports trickle in from agents. Heavy truck traffic near Chartres. Convoys observed heading east on N10. He marks them down. He counts the vehicles. He sees hundreds, maybe thousands of trucks. But his mind, conditioned by decades of military logistics, can't reconcile these numbers with the reality of war. He knows how much fuel an army consumes. He knows how long it takes to move supplies. His maps tell him Patton's Third Army should be running on fumes. They should be slowing down. They should be hitting the wall. Every time he plots a new truck sighting, it just doesn't fit the pattern he expects. This isn't just a historical anecdote. This is a micro-proof of a massive cognitive bias. The Abwehr had direct evidence, physical sightings, yet they filtered it through old assumptions. They believed Patton's advance had to falter. They expected his supply lines to break. Their own internal models, their mental maps of how war should work, starved their actual supply maps of truth. You see this every day, right? You get a new piece of information, something that contradicts your long-held belief. Do you adjust your belief? Or do you twist the information to fit your existing worldview? Here's your dilemma. Do you keep trusting your old assumptions, your comfortable mental maps, or do you start looking for the invisible mechanism now? That quiet engine of efficiency that reshapes reality? If you want to see this Rodondo, if you want to understand how this mechanism works, subscribe now. I opened the test already. The German commanders, relying on those starved maps, consistently underestimated Patton's operational reach. They expected him to run out of gas. They planned their counterattacks based on an illusion created not by Allied deception, but by their own inability to grasp the unprecedented. Every time they thought Patton was about to stop, the Red Ball Express delivered. It kept the momentum alive. It turned supposed pauses into relentless pushes. Think about it. The sheer, unglamorous grunt work of thousands of mostly African-American truck drivers, pushing their rigs through the chaos of war. They became an invisible weapon, a force multiplier that intelligence couldn't quantify. It's a stark lesson in the battlefield of perception. Sometimes the most profound strategic advantage isn't a new weapon or a brilliant tactical maneuver. It's the ability to execute the mundane with such overwhelming efficiency that your enemy literally cannot believe what they're seeing. The truth wasn't hidden. It was just too simple to believe. The next few minutes will peel back the layers of those 48 hours. We'll reveal the specific intelligence reports, the critical misinterpretations, and the brutal operational realities on both sides. You'll see the raw data the Abwehr did collect, and exactly how it was twisted by a lack of imagination, leading to strategic blunders that cost them precious time and ground. This overlooked mechanism of logistics didn't just feed Patton's army. It starved the German intelligence apparatus of accurate information, leaving their supply maps blank where they needed them most. And that, my friend, is where everything changes. The point is this: the Abwehr wasn't blind. They weren't incompetent. Their spies were there, watching. They saw the convoys stretching for miles. They counted the trucks, noted the types, even estimated the loads. But they were looking through the wrong lens. They were trying to fit a new, unimaginable reality into an old, familiar box. Think of it like this. You're trying to understand a new app that uses AI, but your brain keeps defaulting to how a calculator works. It's a fundamental mismatch. The data is there. The interpretation is flawed. That's the real danger. Not a lack of information, but a failure of imagination. Repara Niso for a second. German intelligence reports from that period are chillingly accurate about the number of trucks. One report, dated early September 1944, detailed unprecedented vehicular movement along specific routes. Another mentioned continuous streams of supply vehicles. They had the proof right in their hands, but their commanders, steeped in static logistics models, couldn't reconcile it with Patton's speed. They expected a natural bottleneck. They expected a breakdown. And this is the first big shift. The common tactic, meticulous counting, detailed observation, failed them. Not because the data was wrong, but because their mental model was wrong. They believed a modern army couldn't sustain that pace. Their historical data, their training, their entire worldview screamed impossible. Do you see this in your own life? That moment you cling to an old belief, even when new evidence stares you down. You dismiss the new data because it doesn't fit what you know to be true. That's the trap. Here's your dilemma. Do you keep filtering new information through your comfortable but outdated mental maps? Or do you finally accept that some mechanisms operate on entirely new rules? If this virada virou tua chave, deixa o like para eu continuar no ponto certo. The Abwehr's problem wasn't just a misinterpretation of raw numbers. It was a complete blind spot to the mechanism behind those numbers. The Red Ball Express wasn't just trucks. It was a meticulously designed, high-speed logistical network. It had dedicated routes, one-way traffic for speed, repair stations every 50 miles, and relief drivers at every major stop. It was a living, breathing supply artery engineered for relentless motion. Come with me. Imagine a single highway stretching hundreds of miles where every vehicle moves in the same direction at maximum speed, never stopping for incoming traffic. That was the Red Ball Express. They even had dedicated MPs directing traffic, ensuring no delays. This wasn't just organized, it was optimized. The micro-proof is in the rules themselves. The Red Ball Express had its own dispatchers, its own maintenance crews, even its own security. It was a self-contained system. They ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pushing an average of 12,500 tons of supplies daily. That's enough to supply an entire army group. This wasn't an ad hoc solution. It was a carefully constructed mechanism of continuous flow. Almost nobody perceived this. German intelligence saw trucks. They didn't see the system. They couldn't fathom the sheer, almost brutal efficiency. They couldn't compute the idea of thousands of men and machines, predominantly African American soldiers, pushing themselves beyond every conceivable limit, just to keep Patton moving. This human element, the unglamorous grunt work, was the silent engine of the mechanism. These drivers, often working 18-hour shifts, navigating bombed-out roads under constant threat of ambush, were the invisible weapon. Their resilience, their sheer will to keep going, directly translated into operational reach that defied German expectations. Me diz teo maior trovão nos comentários. What's the one thing you're trying to achieve that feels impossible? I read and bring the step-by-step. The Germans, in their calculations, applied standard fatigue rates. They assumed drivers would break down. They assumed trucks would fail at predictable intervals. They assumed the system had to slow, but the Red Ball Express, fueled by an extraordinary human effort and an unprecedented logistical design, simply didn't conform. They expected pauses. They got pushes. Every time. This wasn't just a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of empathy. A failure to understand the raw human drive behind the mundane. It was a miscalculation that cost them precious time and ground. The next step changes the game. It shows how this relentless, unseen mechanism didn't just move supplies, it fundamentally warped the battlefield for the Abwehr. This relentless, unseen mechanism didn't just move supplies, it fundamentally warped the battlefield for the Abwehr. Think about it. Every German commander relied on intelligence to plan. They needed to know where Patton was, yes, but more importantly, how long he could stay there. How far could he push without running out of fuel, ammo, food? Their maps, their operational planning depended on this. But the Red Ball Express broke their model, permanently. Imagine a German general peering at a large map spread across a table. He's drawing lines, planning defenses. He sees Patton's spearheads advancing, but his intelligence officers keep showing him supply lines that should be stretched thin. They tell him, "Sir, according to our calculations, their fuel consumption at this rate, they'll stall here." He draws a defensive line at that stall point. Only Patton doesn't stall. He keeps coming. That's the horror for the Abwehr. Their own maps, based on their best intelligence, became a source of deception. Not by enemy trickery, but by their own cognitive bias. They saw the dots of trucks, but they couldn't draw the lines of unstoppable logistics. Their maps showed empty spaces where they expected Patton to run dry. But those spaces were illusions. Starved maps indeed. This is where the first big shift really hits hard. The common tactic of meticulous intelligence gathering, counting, observing, reporting, failed. Because the framework for interpretation was shattered. They were looking for a horse-drawn carriage in an age of internal combustion. They expected linear progression. The Red Ball was exponential. Do you ever find yourself clinging to an old spreadsheet, an outdated strategy, even when the market, the world, is clearly moving in a different direction? You keep adding new data, but your analysis still defaults to the old rules. That's exactly what happened. Here's your dilemma. Do you keep trying to force new realities into old mental models? Or do you finally accept that some mechanisms demand a complete reevaluation of your entire playbook? This wasn't just a miscalculation of numbers. It was a strategic blind spot, baked into their very method of understanding war. Their intelligence reports, while factually accurate about truck numbers, became functionally useless. They were collecting data, but they weren't collecting insight. The sheer scale, the continuous flow, the relentless momentum, it was all too alien. Manda iso pra quem ainda tá preso nas táticas antigas. This could save someone a year of wasted effort. The consequences were brutal. German commanders, relying on those starved maps, consistently underestimated Patton's operational reach and endurance. They expected his advance to falter, to run out of gas, to hit the logistical wall. They planned their counterattacks, their defensive lines, their troop movements, based on an illusion created not by deliberate Allied deception, but by their own inability to grasp the unprecedented. Every time they thought Patton was about to stop, the Red Ball Express delivered. It kept the momentum alive. It turned supposed pauses into relentless pushes. Imagine the frustration, the disbelief, as their well-laid plans crumbled, not because of a direct attack, but because the enemy simply kept going when they shouldn't have been able to. This video peels back the layers of those 48 hours. We reveal the specific intelligence reports, the critical misinterpretations, and the brutal operational realities on both sides. You'll see the raw data the Abwehr did collect and exactly how it was twisted by a lack of imagination, leading to strategic blunders that cost them precious time and ground. This overlooked mechanism of logistics, the Red Ball Express, didn't just feed Patton's army. It starved the German intelligence apparatus of accurate information, leaving their supply maps blank where they needed them most. It's a stark lesson in the battlefield of perception. Sometimes, the most profound strategic advantage isn't a new weapon or a brilliant tactical maneuver. It's the ability to execute the mundane with such overwhelming efficiency that your enemy literally cannot believe what they're seeing. The next segment will show you the specific moments this disbelief turned into strategic paralysis. Think about the German 5th Panzer Army, late August 1944. Their intelligence reports painted a clear picture. Patton's Third Army, after its lightning advance across France, had to be exhausted. Their supply lines, conventional wisdom dictated, were stretched to breaking. A counterattack, even a small one, should pin him down. Give them time to regroup. So they launched it. Small, localized thrusts. Not to stop Patton entirely, but to disrupt, to delay. They expected to hit a wall of empty fuel tanks and silent artillery. Instead, they hit a wall of relentless American momentum. Patton's tanks kept rolling. His artillery kept firing. The expected pause, the predicted falter, never came. That's the brutal micro-proof. German staff officers, armed with their accurate spy reports on truck numbers, simply couldn't believe what their eyes or their frontline reports were telling them. Their maps showed an army that should be slowing. Their reality showed an army accelerating. This wasn't just a misjudgment. It was a fundamental clash between expectation and undeniable diesel fuel fact. The Red Ball Express, often within 48 hours of a German assessment, had already invalidated their entire logistical premise. Here's the point. The Abwehr saw the trucks, they saw the movement, but they didn't see the mechanism driving it. This isn't just about counting vehicles, it's about understanding the system. Come with me. The Red Ball Express wasn't just a collection of trucks, it was a single, massive, purpose-built logistical machine. Imagine two main highways, one way only. One for eastbound supplies, one for westbound returns. No detours, no cross-traffic, no delays. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a strict, enforced rule. Military police directed traffic, ensuring constant, uninterrupted flow. Fuel and maintenance stations were set up every 50 miles, like pit stops in a relentless race. Relief drivers waited at major hubs, ready to swap in, keeping the engines running 24/7. This is the simple mechanism that reorganized everything. It cut through the chaos of war with surgical precision. German logistics, by contrast, were decentralized, often chaotic, adapting to battlefield changes. They had no equivalent. They couldn't conceive of a supply chain that operated with this kind of engineered, almost brutal efficiency. That's why their maps starved. They were trying to plot the movement of a conventional army, a predictable army, onto a battlefield where an entirely new kind of logistical beast was operating. They saw the symptoms, the trucks, but they missed the disease, or rather, the cure, an unbreakable mechanism of supply. You see this now, right? You're trying to solve a problem with old tools, old ways of thinking. You're counting the individual pieces, but you're missing the interconnected system that makes them move. Here's your dilemma. Do you keep analyzing the pieces in isolation, or do you start mapping the entire mechanism that connects them? If this Verrata turned your key, leave a like so I know to keep going on the right track. The impact was immediate and devastating for the Germans. Every time their intelligence reported Patton's advance was unsustainable, every time they planned a defensive stand based on his predicted halt, the Red Ball Express proved them wrong. It wasn't just a few isolated instances. It was a continuous, systemic invalidation of their core assumptions. This constant, almost mocking defiance of their logistical models led directly to strategic paralysis. Commanders hesitated. They second-guessed their own intelligence. They waited for the inevitable slowdown that never arrived. This waiting, this paralysis cost them precious hours, precious days. Days Patton used to push deeper, to secure objectives, to shatter their lines. The sheer, unglamorous grunt work of those drivers pushing their rigs through the chaos became a weapon of psychological warfare. It broke the German will to resist, not with bullets, but with relentless, incomprehensible speed. Manda isso pra quem ainda tá preso nas táticas antigas. This could save someone a year of wasted effort. The Abwehr collected plenty of raw data. They knew the routes. They knew the types of trucks. They even had reports on the sheer volume. But their existing mental models, their ingrained understanding of military logistics, simply could not process the idea of a fully dedicated, non-stop, one-way supply artery. It was too simple, too efficient, too unprecedented. They were looking for complex deception, for elaborate ruses. The truth was far more mundane and far more powerful. It was a mechanism of pure, unadulterated logistical force. The next segment reveals how this strategic paralysis then spiraled into critical operational blunders. This strategic paralysis spiraled into critical operational blunders. Imagine trying to hit a moving target when your radar keeps telling you it's standing still. That's the German dilemma. They'd commit troops, expecting a slow, bogged-down enemy. Instead, they'd find Patton's forces already past their predicted choke points. Their counterattacks, timed for a tired, fuel-starved adversary, consistently arrived too late. Or worse, found themselves outflanked by an army they believed was tethered to its supply lines. Segura essa. One specific instance, the German attempt to reinforce their lines near Metz. Their intelligence, based on conventional logistical timelines, projected Patton's advance would slow significantly by late September. They moved divisions, expecting to meet an army at its logistical limits, but the Red Ball Express, defying every metric, kept Patton's spearheads fueled and fed. By the time German reinforcements arrived, Patton had already breached defenses they thought were secure for days. Their plans were obsolete before the ink was dry. This isn't just a historical footnote. This is a micro-proof of how an unseen mechanism can render even accurate data useless. The German spies counted the trucks. Their reports were factual, but the meaning of those facts was lost in translation, twisted by outdated assumptions. They saw the trees, but they completely missed the forest, a forest that was moving at highway speed. Do you ever plan your week, your project, your entire strategy based on how things used to work? You collect new data, new trends, but your brain automatically filters it through an old template. That's the trap. You're planning for a slow, predictable world, while a new mechanism is accelerating everything around you. Here's your dilemma. Do you keep applying old models to new realities, hoping they'll eventually fit? Or do you finally dismantle your assumptions and see the underlying mechanism for what it truly is? If this Verada turns your key, leave a like so I know to keep going on the right track. The real shift, the true moment of revelation, comes when you grasp the temporal disconnect. This is the third big turn. Imagine you're a German staff officer. It's morning. You get an intelligence report. Patton's forces are here, point A. Your logistical models, your experience, tell you he'll be out of gas, out of ammo by tomorrow night. You plan your defense around that predicted halt. You send orders to your frontline units. Hold here. The Americans will stall by X date. But here's the brutal experiment. By the time those orders reach the front, 48 hours later, Patton isn't at point A, nor is he stalled. He's at point C, pushing relentlessly, fully supplied. The Red Ball Express, working its magic, has already invalidated your entire premise. Your detailed intelligence, your precise calculations, they're not just wrong, they're dangerously misleading. They're giving you a false sense of security, an illusion of control. This wasn't a one-off. This was continuous. Every German assessment, every projected slowdown, every anticipated pause was systematically, brutally, and rapidly disproven by the sheer, relentless efficiency of the Red Ball Express. It didn't just feed Patton's army. It starved the German command of accurate time. It created a strategic time lag, a constant 48-hour disadvantage, where their intelligence was always behind reality. This is the hidden cost of clinging to outdated mental models. It's not just that you make bad decisions. It's that your decisions are obsolete before you even execute them. The battlefield was shifting faster than their intelligence could comprehend, faster than their command structure could react. You see this, right? In business, in personal growth. You're trying to outmaneuver a problem, but your information, your understanding of the mechanism at play is always a step behind. You're fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's maps. Mandai Supra King, still stuck in old tactics. This could save someone a year of wasted effort. This continuous invalidation of their intelligence led to a profound crisis of confidence within the German high command. How do you plan when your most reliable data points are constantly proven false? How do you trust your spies when the reality on the ground defies all logic? This wasn't just about losing ground, it was about losing their grip on reality. It was a psychological war, fought with diesel fumes and endless convoys. The Red Ball Express became a symbol of something incomprehensible, something that simply shouldn't be possible. The next segment ties all these threads together, showing you the ultimate payoff of this invisible mechanism. The ultimate payoff of this invisible mechanism wasn't just Patton's advance. It was the complete fracturing of German strategic planning. Their crisis of confidence wasn't abstract. It led to real, bloody losses. Their maps, once tools of insight, became instruments of self-deception. Repara Nisso 1 second. Imagine you're a German commander. You've just received an urgent report. Patton's forces are at a certain position, say Verdun. Your intelligence predicts, based on all known logistical models, that they must slow down. They have to run low on fuel, on ammunition. You plan a counterattack, a defensive line, banking on this inevitable pause. You commit precious reserves. Only the pause never comes. Within 48 hours, sometimes even less, Patton has bypassed your defensive line. His tanks are still rolling. His artillery is still firing. Your reserves, moved to counter a phantom stall, are now out of position. They're vulnerable. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the continuous, grinding reality. Every time the Abwehr's accurate reports predicted a logistical limit, the Red Ball Express obliterated it. This is the third big turn. It's not just that their intelligence was wrong. It's that their intelligence was actively used to make decisions that then failed spectacularly. The raw data, the truck counts, the routes, all of it became a cruel joke. They had the pieces, but the picture they were building was a mirage. Think of it like this. You're trying to build a complex financial model, but one key variable, say interest rates, is changing not just daily, but hourly, in ways your model can't predict. Every calculation you make, every projection, is instantly obsolete. That's the strategic nightmare the Red Ball Express inflicted. Quer ver por qué this mechanism was so devastating? It didn't just move supplies, it moved time. It compressed the operational timeline so drastically that German intelligence, fixed in its traditional assumptions, couldn't keep up. The 48-hour lag wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a death sentence for their defensive plans. The point is this: the Red Ball Express didn't just feed Patton's army. It starved the German command of accurate time. It created a strategic time lag, a constant, brutal disadvantage. Their intelligence was always behind reality, always. Do you see this in your own work? That moment you realize your entire strategy is based on a timeline that no longer exists? You're reacting to yesterday's problem, while today's challenge has already morphed into tomorrow's crisis. That's the cost of ignoring a new powerful mechanism. Here's your dilemma. Do you keep fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's maps, hoping for a different outcome? Or do you finally accept that the mechanism of time itself has accelerated, demanding a completely new approach? If this virata turned your key, leave a like so I know to keep going on the right track. The psychological toll on German commanders was immense. How do you trust your intelligence when it consistently leads you astray? How do you plan counteroffensives when the enemy simply refuses to run out of steam? This wasn't just about losing ground. It was about losing their grip on reality. It was a psychological war fought with diesel fumes and endless convoys. The Red Ball Express became a symbol of something incomprehensible, something that simply shouldn't be possible by their understanding of warfare. This profound crisis of confidence led to hesitation, to second-guessing, to a paralysis that cost them precious hours, days, even weeks. Hours Patton used to push deeper, days to secure objectives, weeks to shatter their lines. The sheer unglamorous grunt work of those drivers, pushing their rigs through the chaos, became a weapon of psychological warfare. It broke the German will to resist, not with bullets, but with relentless, incomprehensible speed. They saw the individual trucks, they noted the numbers, but they couldn't grasp the system. They couldn't believe in a force multiplier so mundane, yet so powerful. The truth was too simple, too efficient, too unprecedented for their ingrained military doctrine. They were looking for elaborate deception, for cunning ruses. The truth was far more mundane and far more powerful. It was a mechanism of pure, unadulterated logistical force. Mandai soprakain, still stuck in old tactics. This could save someone a year of wasted effort. The result? German units were constantly reacting to a situation that was already hours, sometimes days, ahead of their intelligence. Their defensive lines were drawn based on where Patton should have been, not where he was. Their counterattacks were launched against an army that was already past its predicted logistical breaking point, fully supplied and still accelerating. This continuous, systemic invalidation of their intelligence wasn't just a tactical disadvantage, it was a strategic catastrophe. It led to a cascade of blunders that ultimately sealed their fate on the Western Front. This cascade of blunders wasn't just about losing ground, it was about losing time, the most critical resource in war. Repara nisso un segundo. German leadership found themselves caught in a trap of their own making. They were unable to update their mental models. Their intelligence reports, technically accurate in their raw data, were rendered useless by an ingrained inability to process the unprecedented. How do you fight an enemy who defies all your rules, all your logistical axioms? The Abwehr spies saw the trucks. They counted them. They reported the routes. But their commanders couldn't believe the implications. They couldn't reconcile the sheer volume and speed with their established understanding of how armies moved. It was like trying to understand a supercomputer with an abacus. The data was there, but the processing framework was centuries behind. I know where this gets stuck for you too. You see the inputs, but your brain filters them through an old template. This wasn't a failure of data collection. It was a failure of imagination, a profound cognitive bias. They were looking for complex deception, for elaborate ruses that would explain Patton's relentless push. The truth was far simpler, far more brutal, an unbreakable mechanism of supply, executed with such overwhelming efficiency that it transcended their belief. They expected the elegant feint. They got the blunt, diesel-fueled hammer. Olha o detalhe que ninguém te contou. This mechanism was built on the unglamorous grunt work of thousands, mostly African-American truck drivers pushing their rigs through the chaos of war. No glory, just relentless, disciplined, 24/7 delivery. This wasn't about a new weapon. It was about perfecting the mundane to an almost terrifying degree. It turned a logistical necessity into an invisible weapon. It became a force multiplier intelligence couldn't quantify. This is the battlefield of perception. The Germans couldn't quantify it because it didn't fit their categories. Their maps, designed to track conventional supply lines, literally starved. They had blanks where they needed predictive power. They had numbers without meaning. You continue to look for the flashy solution, or do you focus on the robust mechanism that actually delivers, even if it feels mundane? The Red Ball Express didn't just feed Patton's army. It starved the German intelligence apparatus of accurate information, leaving their supply mats blank where they needed them most. This wasn't deliberate Allied deception. It was the sheer, incomprehensible power of logistical superiority. It made their predictions moot. Their battle plans, based on expected pauses, became exercises in futility. So the German commanders, relying on those starved maps, consistently underestimated Patton's operational reach and endurance. Every time they thought he was about to stop, the Red Ball Express delivered. It kept the momentum alive. It turned supposed pauses into relentless pushes. This video peels back the layers of those 48 hours. It shows the specific intelligence reports, the critical misinterpretations, the brutal operational realities. We've delved into the raw data the Abwehr did collect. We've shown you exactly how it was twisted by a lack of imagination, leading to strategic blunders that cost them precious time and ground. This overlooked mechanism didn't just move supplies, it moved time. It accelerated the battlefield beyond their comprehension. That's the real strategic nightmare. This continuous, systemic invalidation of their intelligence wasn't just a tactical disadvantage. It was a strategic catastrophe. It led to a cascade of blunders that ultimately sealed their fate on the Western Front. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other invisible backbones of history are still waiting to be truly understood? What mechanisms are you missing now? The next segment ties all these threads together, showing you the ultimate payoff of this invisible mechanism and how to spot similar blind spots in your own life. So we've walked through the fog of war, seen the German map starve not by lack of data, but by a lack of imagination. The Abwehr saw the trucks, yes, but they couldn't see the mechanism. They couldn't believe in the relentless, mundane power of the Red Ball Express. This wasn't some grand deception. It was the brutal, simple truth of logistics, executed so flawlessly it broke their strategic framework. You witnessed the temporal disconnect, the 48-hour gap that turned their intelligence into a dangerous illusion. That's the first loop closed. The second, the timeless lesson. How often do you miss the invisible mechanisms accelerating everything around you, clinging to old maps in a new world? Here are 3 steps to avoid that trap, starting right now. First, cut the noise. Stop looking for the flashy solution and identify the true, often mundane mechanism driving your results. Second, challenge your assumptions. Ask, what if my most basic understanding of how this works is simply wrong now? And third, measure time, not just output. Look for that temporal disconnect. Where is reality moving faster than your predictions? This isn't just history. This is your playbook for today. If this journey through the unseen mechanism of the Red Ball Express turned your key, leave a like right now. If you want to see this running in real time, if you want to apply these steps to your biggest challenge, comment, "Show me the mechanism" below. The biggest payoff? Understanding this. I show you how to apply these precise principles in real time to your own world. Click on a playlist agora and come with me. The next video is waiting.